It's now my pleasure to introduce Michael Mullery. Michael, you have the floor.
Thanks a lot, Colton. Welcome, everybody, to the SQL Server 2012 Licensing Changes Overview. My name is Michael Mullery, and along with Dave Pugh, we are CDW Solution Architects. So we are resources available to our customers to help out with all kinds of questions related not only to licensing, but technology features of SQL Server. And we represent our SQL Server engineering practice as well. I'll talk a little bit about some of that stuff at the end of the presentation today, but let's get into the meat. What we're here to talk about today are the changes that Microsoft announced about a year and a half ago and came into effect on April 1st of 2012 when SQL Server 2012 launched. Now, Dave and I have spent many hours talking to customers just like you across the country about these changes over the last year or so, but we realized that there are still a ton of questions out there, and that prompted this set of webinars. We're doing one today, and we've got a follow-up session, which actually be the same content, but for folks who are not able to get to this one on Thursday afternoon at 1 Central Time. That should be in the invite that you had to get to this one, so if you've got colleagues who need this information, that will be available as well. Let's get into some of the details here. And Colton, I am having problems advancing my slide. All right, was that you or me?
Okay. That one was me. It's the blue arrows in the bottom left corner.
All right. I'm not sure why that wasn't working for me, but thank you. So we'll start out here with an introduction, a brief overview of some of the things that Microsoft introduced in SQL Server 2012. It wasn't all licensing changes, although for some of us it feels like that's the case. They really did announce a lot of different new technology in this version of the server. They grouped them into three categories: mission-critical confidence, breakthrough insight, and cloud on your terms. And Colton, I'm stuck again. I've got no arrows and my keyboard is not working. Maybe I'll just say beep. How does that sound? So starting out with mission-critical confidence, they've introduced a number of technologies here, including one of the most popular features of SQL 2012 is certainly something that we spend a lot of time talking to folks about, which is always on for global high availability. So Microsoft has got a whole series of technologies that they've lumped under this marketing term, always on, for SQL Server 2012, including database availability groups, active secondaries so that you can actually do live reads from data on the secondaries, multiple secondaries, faster failover, et cetera. In terms of mission-critical confidence, they've also increased the performance of SQL Server. One of the ways that they've done that is with a technology that they've titled in-memory column store, which is a different way of indexing the data, and without any changes to the code can deliver a lot of really incredible performance gains. And then also, this version of SQL Server is supported on Windows Server Core. So Windows Server Core is the version of the Windows Server operating system that basically removes almost all of the graphic user interface, which cuts down on the amount of code that would need to be patched in the surface attack area, and so can increase the security and reliability of your SQL Server as well. Colton, could you advance to the next slide, please? There we go. All right, and now my buttons have reappeared, so I think I can take it from here. But just a quick case study for everybody on mission-critical confidence. This one is from the Mediterranean Shipping Company. They implemented always-on technology while SQL Server 2012 was still in beta, and got all kinds of improvement in application failover and uptime and that case study is on Microsoft's website. So the second area where they've put a lot of focused effort on is Breakthrough Insight. By now, most of you have probably heard of Power Pivot and probably Power View, but both of those technologies are not only add-ins to Excel, but also there's platform infrastructure behind them on SQL Server that can deliver really great data visualization to the end users that are trying to get access to analyzing data and reporting. There's data quality services improvements, data quality services additions in SQL Server 2012, and a new BI semantic model for developing all kinds of business intelligence solutions on the same platform, a tabular model that Microsoft has been working on for quite some time, is implemented in this version. And then some new scalable analytics and data warehousing components. So, for example, increasing the number of partitions available, or sort of the size of the cubes that are available, and we have a case study here as well, this one on EdgeNet. So they used some of the new Power View capabilities to access insights into their data that they hadn't had access to before, and again, delivering this stuff out to end users to do ad hoc analysis. By the way, I should put in a quick plug. We have got some other webinars coming up toward the end of this month. You should see an invite in a mailbox near you, but we'll be delivering some Power View and Power Pivot demonstrations as part of our webinar on Microsoft's Business Intelligence platform in just a couple of weeks. So you can get some more detail there. Finally, the third area that Microsoft is promoting their new features in SQL Server 2012 is Cloud on Your Terms. So basically, this is part of Microsoft's initiative to take all of their products and make them very cloud-friendly. They've done some great work here in being able to move applications in and out of the public and private cloud. There is, of course, a platform as a service component to this with Microsoft SQL Server Azure, and that in combination with some of the licensing changes is making the flexibility of moving your applications in and out of the cloud a lot greater. So their case study here is for the city of Miami. Again, this case study is posted on Microsoft's website. But just as one example, they've got a 911 system on premise. They kind of know what the load requirements are for that application based on historical data. But then they've got a 311 system that they've got in the cloud that has periodic surges in information that's needed out of that system. And they moved that, again, to the cloud so that they didn't have to support all that infrastructure and hardware all year long, just when the surges come, and saving them almost $1 billion a year in costs. So there's some great reasons to move SQL Server applications into the cloud. Okay, now, again, there's a lot of new technology and reasons that you should look at, potentially moving your infrastructure to 2012 where possible. But we need to know then what is the licensing implication of that, and that's what we're going to spend the lion's share of the rest of our session talking about today. So basically, there are these 6 changes that have happened to Microsoft SQL Server licensing. And I'll go through details on each one, but just again to list them off there. The edition lineup has been simplified. There's a new edition of SQL Server. The Enterprise Edition in the Server PAL licensing model has been retired. So again, we'll go through some details on that one. Where they have moved from processors to cores. And depending on where you are in your current licensing agreement with Microsoft, you may have already moved to cores, or you may be about to move to cores. So we'll talk about how that's all going to work. The CAL price has increased, and there have been some expanded virtualization rights included with software assurance. So we'll start taking a look at that a little bit, starting out here with better edition alignment. Rather than having, I think there used to be 5 or 6 different editions of SQL Server. There's a web edition, developer edition, etc. Well, the developer edition is still there, but there are basically only 3 commercial versions of SQL, or editions of SQL Server out right now. The sort of default go-to is SQL Server Standard down there in the lower left-hand corner. Standard Edition has basic database, OLTP, database engine capabilities, and it also has some BI capabilities. And something that folks didn't know is that Standard Edition does come with analysis services and reporting services to do some of the basic BI work that you would need to do. But if you need to move deeper into BI, you would look at one of the other 2 versions. So the next version up, which is new, is the Business Intelligence Edition of SQL Server 2012. And if you want to get the premium BI features, for example, Power View, all of the integration with SharePoint and Power View and some of the advantages there, the BI semantic model, you would move to this edition to gain those capabilities. The third edition then is SQL Server Enterprise, and it includes everything that's in the BI edition with all the premium BI features, as well as, of course, everything in the standard edition, but includes things like the greatest amount of flexibility with always-on, high availability and disaster recovery technologies, all the column store indexing with the blazing fast performance, and other data center capabilities that are only found and typically needed at the high end of the scale of SQL Server. There are some licensing advantages to Enterprise Edition as well, especially if you're getting into virtualizing your SQL Server, as so many of our customers are, and I'll talk about those in a minute. But again, for now, there are 3 editions of SQL Server: Standard, BI, and Enterprise Edition. One note here, this is a change from prior to 2012, change from how things were working before in terms of licensing models. There always have been, or for quite some time anyway, there have been 2 ways of licensing SQL Server. You can do hardware-based licensing, where you basically look at the processing power of the server you're running it on, license for that. It used to be processors, so you'd count the processors, license the processors, and you were done. Or if you want to, you can sort of pay as you go, which is the server plus Cal model. So maybe you're starting out with just a very few amount of users doing some sort of pilot or test environment, and you want to, you need to purchase SQL Server, but you just need it for 5 or 10 users. You can purchase a SQL Server in the server and Cal mode, and then buy CALs, which are client access licenses for either devices or users that will be using that SQL Server data. Now, both of those modes have been around for some time, as I mentioned, but what you'll notice here is that the Enterprise Edition is no longer available from Microsoft in the Server plus Cal model. If you need Enterprise Edition features, you will be purchasing any new servers based on the hardware, in this case cores, that are on the server itself. The Business Intelligence Edition is only available in that client access, server client access mode, and Standard Edition continues to be available in both models, server and Cal, and hardware-based or core-based in this version of SQL Server. Now, one quick note about the Enterprise Edition software. If you are on an existing enterprise agreement or enrollment for application platform, and you have and you need access to Enterprise Edition in the Server plus Cal mode, if you are on one of those longer agreements, you can still purchase it that way through the end of your agreement, and you will be able to continue to just renew software assurance on that license, in perpetuity. Microsoft hasn't announced any end to that. What you will not be able to do, though, is going forward buy new copies of SQL Server Enterprise in the Server plus Cal mode. I've got a slide on some details on that in just a moment as well. Okay, so let's talk about the hardware licensing then. So this is paying for the power you need. Cores are the new way of measuring for capacity for hybrid environments. This is something that the industry did before Microsoft jumped on board. So if you're working with other database vendors out there, you're probably pretty familiar with this. Microsoft is a little bit late to the game on this, but they have determined that that's the best way for them to license SQL Server. And if you've got processor licenses currently with SA, with software assurance on them, you can receive SQL Server 2012 at no additional cost. You'll just trade in your existing processor licenses and receive core licenses for those. And again, I've got a slide on that in a second to show you how that works. But let's talk about the foundation step, which is how do we license SQL Server by cores? In a physical server environment, over in the lower left-hand corner of this slide, it shows that you basically just count up all of the cores on the hardware. It's anything that the operating system can see. You need to license a minimum of 4 cores per processor. So if you've still got older hardware out there that supports 1 or 2 cores per processor, you still need to assign a minimum of 4 core licenses. And then we'll talk about that virtualization stuff in a second. On the virtual machine side of things, then, you license the virtual cores that are assigned to the VM. You license a minimum of 4 cores per VM, and then there's something down there at the bottom of that slide that's very important. For license mobility, you need software assurance. License mobility is the right that Microsoft grants folks with software assurance on their licenses that allows you to move the virtual machine. Actually, specifically, it allows you to reassign the license from one host to another. So in the case of a catastrophic event where you lose a virtual host, you can, of course, reassign the license because the first host is gone. But in the case of a voluntary move where you're bringing a host down because you need to perform maintenance, patch software or add memory or, change the disk configuration, something like that, if you move a virtual machine, you must reassign its license. And with the standard Microsoft licensing, you're only allowed to do that once every 90 days. Most of our customers here at CDW are running virtualization to allow them a certain amount of flexibility to do that with their hardware. And so our recommendation to them is to take a look at software assurance. And if anybody wants to get into a deeper conversation about that, we can certainly do that offline. If you just contact your account manager, they'll get you set up with Dave or I, and we can go into some details. So again, for the cores, you count the number of cores in the server. 4 core licenses are required per physical processor, and you purchase the number of cores you need for that server. I should mention that the pricing of the core licenses are 1/4 of the cost of a SQL Server 2008 R2 processor license. So if you're running 4 cores per processor, your price for SQL Server will essentially be the same as it was 4 or 5 years ago. So there wouldn't be any price increase. If you are running more cores per processor, then you would see a corresponding increase depending on how many processors you're throwing at that environment. So just a real quick here graphic representation of that. If I have 2 cores and they each have 2 processors, I have 2 processors and I have to purchase 4 cores minimum per processor. So in this particular case, I would need 8 cores, which would be the same cost as the SQL Server 2008 R2, since they're 1/4 of the price. Next example I have here is if I had 2 cores with 4 processors each. Again, 4 cores is the minimum, so that's the same 8 cores per processor. Again, the same cost. And if it were 6-core processors, then I would need 2 processors, 6 cores or 12 cores, and that would be about a 50% price increase on purchasing new licenses. Okay, I see the QA queue is starting to get a little action, so I imagine Dave's busily typing away answers there. And by the way, if there are questions that are still unanswered when we get to the end, we'll have a couple of minutes for Q&A. So this is, again, continuing on licensing with cores, in this case the virtual environment. A little bit more detail here. We have two options. One option is to license the host that the SQL Server virtual machines are running on. If you license that with Enterprise Edition and Software Assurance, and you license all of the cores on the physical hardware, you get an unlimited number of virtual machines on that particular host. So for folks who are running SQL Server with a certain amount of density, if you get a number of virtual machines per physical server, this could be a very economical way of licensing a SQL Server for you. For most of our customers here at CDW, however, they do not have that kind of density, and so it makes more sense for them to go to option 2, which is you just license each virtual machine on its own. So in this case, I've got a virtual machine 1 that has SQL Server 2012, and it's got 4 cores assigned to it, another server that has no SQL Server on it, and then a third server that has 6 cores of SQL Server 2012 assigned to it. Again, the minimum is 4, and this one meets the minimum, so we count 4 here. We need 4 licenses there, and then 6 licenses here, so for a total of 10 core licenses of SQL Server on this particular example. Again, if I wanted to be able to move those virtual machines from host to host freely, not worry about the 90-day time limit, I would need to make sure to purchase those with Software Assurance on either Standard or Enterprise Edition so that I could bypass the 90-day time window component of the licensing. All right. The other mode of licensing SQL Server is by user or device with a client access license. It allows you to pay for the users or devices that you need. You need only a single CAL to access any number of SQL servers. So I buy a CAL once for somebody, and they can access, a dozen or 2 dozen or how many ever SQL servers are in my environment with that one CAL. And it does align to SharePoint and Office licensing, and this, I suspect, is the reason that they've included the Business Intelligence Edition in this particular mode, because Business Intelligence with Microsoft as a platform relies very heavily on Office and potentially SharePoint to deliver data to the end user. So it allows you to sort of scale up your licensing along with the way that the rest of that solution is going to be licensed. Basically, again, there are 2 components to license. You buy a server license for every server in the environment, whether it's physical or virtual. You buy 1 server license per server, and then you buy a client access license for every user or device, depending on how you want to slice it up, that will be accessing the SQL Server. Just a reminder, a lot of people think that the CAL model has gone away. It certainly has not. The SQL Server 2012 CAL is a very valuable CAL because it can access the BI edition. It can access any SQL Server Standard Edition server, any legacy enterprise server, and then any server running, whether it's running in virtual machine or on physical hardware. So there are a lot of things that the CAL can still access. It's just that in some cases it may not make sense to do that any longer because of the way the financial cost has changed a bit since the Enterprise Edition no longer has that model. If you'd like some help analyzing that, we've got some resources at CDW that can help you there as well, and I'll mention those in just a few minutes. Again, just a quick example here for either the Business Intelligence Edition or the Standard Edition, which are the only 2 editions of SQL Server you can license new with CALs. You're basically licensing 1 server license per VM, and then you count the number of client access licenses you need by the folks that are accessing that data, whether directly or indirectly accessing the data. So in this case, we would need 2 BI server licenses because there's 2 BI edition VMs. In this case, there are 2 standard edition VMs, and so we would need 2 standard licenses for those servers, plus any of the CALs, the client access licenses that would need to go along with that. One quick note here in terms of cloud optimization with respect to licensing. If you have software assurance, Microsoft has built in just a ton of flexibility. With software assurance, you're allowed to move your license anywhere you want. So you might start out by developing an application on-premise, and if you have it on your premises, then you can, run your license, run your software. If you decide later that you want to go to a private cloud and go with a virtualized solution, you can take that license and transfer it to your private cloud. No issues at all. Again, standard business intelligence or enterprise edition will allow you to do this. And if you eventually want to move that up to a hosted solution, you can do that as well. Again, no catches there at all. If you've got software assurance on that license, you can move that server anywhere as frequently in or out of the cloud as you wish. Okay, now, I imagine many of you are on the line today because you have an enterprise agreement or an EAP that you signed before Microsoft made these changes in April of 2012 last year. And you're wondering what's going to happen to your existing licensing and how do you move into the new model. And that's what this section of the presentation is aimed at addressing, is to try to figure out what are we going to do with all of those existing licenses. So the first thing we have to talk about is enterprise servers. So as I mentioned earlier, Enterprise Edition is only offered via core licensing. It is no longer available to purchase in the Server Plus CAL model. But that doesn't mean your existing investments go away. So the EE servers went off the price list as of 7/1. If you did not have an enterprise agreement in place by then, you just won't have access to any Enterprise Edition, new Enterprise Edition servers. However, if you have an EA or an EAP and you're still working in under the old model, you can continue to purchase those Enterprise Edition servers through the end of the term of your contract. So if your contract was signed in March of 2012, you can continue to purchase Enterprise Edition servers in the Server Plus CAL model until March of 2015. The SA SKU only will continue as an option, so you can upgrade to new versions and maintain that software under software assurance even after your current agreement expires. So if you have Enterprise Edition on software assurance, you don't have to switch over to cores immediately. You can continue to pay for SA on that existing Enterprise Edition license and have that follow you along with your new contract. There are a couple of things to know about, though. Again, software assurance must be maintained in order to get the new versions. And this option down here, bullet down here, number 4, the Enterprise Edition server, on any version that is, so let me give you an example here. If you're running SQL Server 2008 R2 currently with Enterprise Edition, and you upgrade, and you're licensed in the Server CAL mode, and you upgrade to 2012 or any later edition, for example, 2014 is coming out soon, that version, that instance will have a 20-core limit per server. So SQL Server Enterprise Edition running in the Server Plus CAL licensing mode will be limited to 20 cores. Now, for most of you, that will have absolutely no impact. As a matter of fact, many of you are running those Enterprise Edition servers in a virtual machine, and you may only be assigning 1 or 2 or 4 virtual cores to those machines, and you never approach that capacity limit. For some of you, however, are running SQL Server Enterprise Edition on a very beefy physical box that maybe has 24 or more cores in it, that will present a problem, and you're going to need to discuss how to attack that. That's something, again, that CDW can help you out with, both from a licensing and or application perspective. So just to summarize again, the Business Intelligence Edition is going to be roughly the same price as the 2008 R2 Enterprise Edition servers. So that's kind of the replacement price-wise. The Enterprise Edition cores do not require CALs, and they'll contain all the 2012 features and solutions and capabilities. But for the Enterprise server and the server plus CAL mode, that's being retired. Has been retired. Okay, so what happens if you want to migrate to core-based licensing? Again, if you've got existing servers out there that you purchased processor licenses for, what happens now that there's this core licensing? When your enterprise agreement or your enrollment for application platform, your EAP, when that expires, you will end up trading in those processor licenses for core licenses. So while the agreement is still good, you can upgrade those servers to 2012, with no issue. At the end of the term, then, what you do is you inventory the actual cores in use. And Microsoft has got a great tool for that. It's called the MAP Toolkit, the Microsoft Assessment and Planning Toolkit. And they'll take that as documentation for the number of cores that you have in use at that point. What will happen then is you will get processor licenses, those processor licenses will be turned in and renewed into cores. And you'll get a minimum of 4 cores per processor license. For every processor license that you have, you get a minimum of 4, but you may get more if you're running on higher-end hardware. Again, this chart attempts to explain that. So up here at the top, I have the number of physical cores. So there are 2 cores in this first processor, 4 cores, 6 cores, 8, and 10. For Enterprise or Standard Edition, if you've licensed SQL Server by processor, and you have 2 core processors, Microsoft will grant you a minimum of 4 cores per processor license that you're running, so that's what you get there. Of course, if you have 4 processors, you will get 4 core processors, you will get 4 core licenses. And if you have 6, you'll get 6, 8, 8, 10, 10. So Microsoft is really attempting to make you whole here in terms of the number of cores that you will get in exchange for the processor licenses that you have. So you shouldn't need to purchase any new core licenses just to maintain your existing environment. What will change, though, is when you move to the new agreement and you decide to renew software assurance, you will need to pay software assurance on the new number of cores rather than your old processor count. So that's where you could see a price increase. For example, if you were running 4 core processors, when you went to renew, you'd get 4 core licenses for your processor license, and the SA would be about the same as the SA is in your current agreement. If you have 8 core processors, though, you would get all of the licenses to cover the 8 cores that you have, but when you went to renew, you'd renew 8 cores of software assurance, which would effectively double your SA price on that amount of SQL Server licenses you'd get to make you whole. SA may cost you more depending on how many cores you're running. Okay, and there's some folks out there probably running Data Center Edition. Just to let you know, you get a minimum of 8 cores for every processor license that you have when you trade those Data Center Edition licenses in of SQL Server. Okay, so how can we help? Well, there's a number of ways we can help. I'll start out with the fact that we've got a SQL Server licensing review. So again, if you're in a situation where you've got a pretty complex environment, dozens of SQL servers, hard to figure out just exactly where you're at, what the best licensing mode is, we have a no-fee, no-pressure discussion, structured discussion that we can have with you around going through your existing SQL servers and the corresponding licensing, and we can help you reconcile that. Remove the guesswork from this, anticipate what your renewal will look like, what the SA changes are going to be, and obviously the sooner we get in there and get out in front of it, the better it is for everybody because we've got more time to make those decisions, but it can really help you understand how to make the most cost-effective SQL Server licensing purchases. This is something that we do independent of your discussions with Microsoft, so you may wish to get in there and find out some information before your renewal, but we can do it in conjunction with Microsoft as well if you prefer to have the conversation that way. Again, contact your account manager or your licensing account executive from CDW, and we can get you connected with that. Something else we can do is talk to you about the Enrollment for Application Platform, or an EAP. Some folks haven't heard about this licensing mechanism. It's about 2 years old or 3 years old from Microsoft, relatively new. But what it does is it helps you spread out the payments. So if you have a lot of SQL Server to purchase, or you're just interested in a situation of turning some capital expenditure of licensing into an operational expenditure, the EAP can help out. Just a real quick introduction to that. Essentially, I've got a customer example here where they have 6 servers that are not covered by software assurance, and then 6 servers that are covered by software assurance. If they wanted to move to 2012, they wanted to move all their servers to 2012, well, since these are covered by SA, they could just upgrade the ones on the bottom here without any issue. For the ones on the top, they'd have to buy a brand new license, and if they wanted that covered with SA, then they'd have to pay software assurance in addition to that. But the key factor here being they need to rebuy SQL Server to cover the license to move to the new version. What the EAP will allow them to do is buy any new units with a major discount. In the case of Enterprise Edition, it's a near 40% discount. They get to cover all of their units with software assurance, and they don't have to purchase the license, the L, until they decide to drop out of the program. So they can, on the existing units that they have. So they can defer the cost of the L potentially indefinitely, the license, just pay software assurance, and then have one standard payment that they're going to be able to cover for their SQL servers every year without having to worry about the ebb and flow of projects. You know, you get the new ERP project in and you've got to buy a whole bunch of SQL Server. You can spread that out a little bit by making software assurance payments and then just make those annual true-up payments and spread it out over a longer time. So something to check out. Again, if you're interested in more details on the EAP or the Enrollment for Application Platform, that's something that your licensing account executive or your account manager can get you more detail on. Something else that might be helpful, as I mentioned at the beginning of this discussion, I also, in addition to talking about SQL Server technology and the licensing, I also represent our engineering practice at CDW. So as an example of that, our engineering practice has a standard offering called a SQL Server Health Check. If you're thinking about upgrading to SQL Server 2012, or maybe it's just been a little while since somebody's put a set of eyeballs on your SQL Server environment, this health check can go in and in 3 to 5 days, or upwards of that if you have a highly complex or a very large environment, do some analysis, talk to you about what your specific concerns are, and then come back with some recommendations on here's where things look good, here's where things are not so good, where maybe you're not meeting current industry standards or Microsoft best practices around your SQL Server environment, whether that's due to just misconfiguration at the start or server configuration drift or whatever, we can get in there and help you find that. So if that's something you're interested in, again, contact your account manager. Just one last slide here for you on some resources that are available. There is, again, a SQL Server licensing review that's available through your account manager, licensing account executive that I mentioned earlier. There's a link in the second bullet to the licensing changes that have come along with SQL Server 2012. So all of the things that I've talked about are laid out in that document, and there's some more detail in there, so you can look through that. And there is a technical feature breakdown of SQL by edition in the next link. So if you're interested in finding out, well, geez, I don't know whether I should buy standard BI or enterprise edition of SQL Server, they have it all laid out there for the different editions broken down by feature. And then if you want to go back and look at what your R2 licensing used to look like and compare the two, I've included a link for the SQL Server 2008 R2 licensing as well. And at this point, we've got about 15 minutes left. I saw the QA queue bop up and down there a little bit, but looks like, Dave, we were able to answer the things in that queue. If anybody has any outstanding questions they'd like to bring up on the phone, Colton, I think we can open up the lines.
If you'd like to ask a question today verbally, if you're already dialed in, please press *8 to let me know that you have a question, and then I will bring you to the live side so you can ask your question verbally. If you haven't already dialed in, I'm putting the number on the screen now. Please dial in, and again, press *8 to let us know that you have a question. I have a question from Pennsylvania.
Hi there. I currently run version 2008 with the processor edition, and we're sticking with that for that one server. But how does that work with VMware? Can I allocate one processor and allocate as many cores as I want?
Well, you can, but the licensing may change a little bit. So let me ask you one other quick question. Do you have software assurance on that license?
Not sure.
Okay. Well, I'll answer it both ways then. If you've got software on assurance on the license, you can use the new 2012 rules, which allow you to run standard edition and have license mobility and all of that. If you don't have software assurance on the license, you need to run under the 2008 rules. And the way of calculating how many processor licenses you have is back in that link I mentioned on the previous slide. I'm not going to switch right now because I don't want to throw Colton's number off the screen here. But back on that link, it describes in the R2 quick licensing reference how to calculate that. The basic way you look at it is you need to divide the number of licenses You start over. You need to divide the number of cores you're assigning the virtual machine by the number of cores per processor on the host. And that's how you come up with how many licenses you get. So as an example.
Can I give you my example?
Yeah, let's do that. What is it?
Okay. I have a 24-core server with 2 processors, with each processor having 12 cores.
Okay. Is it hyper-threading turned on? Are they really 6-core processors, or?
No, they're 12-core AMDs.
Okay, great. And how many cores are you assigning to the virtual machines?
Currently, I'm assigning 8, but I thought I could assign up to 12 and be okay.
And you're absolutely correct there. So you at 8 divided by 12 is less than 1, so you would just need 1 processor license in that case. And you're right, you could go up to 12. 12 divided by 12 is 1, and you'd still only need 1 processor license in that case. If you assign above that, then you would need a second processor license to cover that virtual machine.
And if I wanted more, would I have to, since I can't buy 2008 licenses anymore, would I have to buy a 2012 license, and would I just be able to add those extra cores, or would everything fall over to 2012 licensing?
Everything would fall over to 2012 licensing. So in that case, if you didn't have software assurance, that would be a bit messy because you may lose your investment in your existing processors for that particular, unless you could reassign that license someplace else.
Okay.
Yeah, you can't mix and match.
And then on that same note, I guess I'm running a cluster, so I'm allowed to have a second server with identical licensing on the passive node?
If we're talking about using Windows failover services, that clustering?
Right, yeah, yep.
Yep, then you are allowed a second node as long as it wouldn't require more licenses. You just have to license the larger of the two nodes. Typically, people make them identical. There would be no additional cost there.
Okay, and on the 2008 model, if I fail over to the passive node, is that the once every 90 days thing?
That is not covered by Microsoft's licensing rules in the same way. They allow Windows failover clustering failovers as frequent as you want them to. What this licensing specifically talks about is virtual machine migration. So when you're moving the virtual machine around, that's where that kicks in.
Okay, so vMotion but not failover clustering?
That's correct, yep.
Okay, all right, great, thank you.
You bet. Anything else out there, Colton?
No calls at the moment.
All right, well, fantastic. It looks like we've still got a few folks on. Before everybody drops off, let me take this time to thank everyone for their time and attention this morning. Again, this session will be repeated Thursday afternoon, so the invite that you got to get to this one will get you to that one as well. And then please look for an email on the business intelligence webinars that Dave and I will be delivering later this month. Thanks, everybody, for your time. I'll hang out for another minute or two. If anybody has another question, please use that number to dial in, and we'll try to get it answered for you.
I have another question.
Go ahead.
Okay, I guess I'm the only one having questions today.
That's all right.
So, again, in the 2008 environment, am I allowed to have unlimited instances within one VM? So could I have, like, 10 instances, named instances of that SQL Server in 2008, and is that the same rule for 2012?
Yes, although I don't remember. There is a limit to the number of instances, but it's typically higher than anybody ever can get to because of the resources they have available. Certainly in a virtual machine, that's going to be the case. But yeah, you can add multiple instances to a single operating system multiple instances of SQL Server to a single operating system without incurring additional licensing costs. So 10 is definitely under the limit. I know that in 2012 the limit is 50, but I don't honestly remember what it is for 2008 unless Dave happens to remember that bit of trivia. But 10 is certainly within the limit.
But that's a software limit, not a license limit, right?
Well, it's both, actually. Yep.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Fantastic. Anything else out there, Colton?
No new callers.
Okay, well, I guess we can call it a wrap. Folks, if you've got other questions that you think of during the intervening time between now and Thursday, you're certainly welcome to contact your CDW account manager, and we'll get you connected with the right resource to make sure that those questions get answered.
Thank you, Michael and Dave. Thank you all for joining us. You may now disconnect from the audio portion of the conference.